Thank you so much, William, for all you do to make these programs happen. And I appreciate your expertise through the years, really, with me on the different aspects of Hebrew that we've talked about. Hello, everyone. This is Gabriel Aryeh Sanders, and we are in a study of the Book of Psalms, specifically focusing on some of the short ones from that section from 120 to 134, known as the Psalms of Ascent or Psalms of Degrees, in Hebrew called Shirei HaMa'alot. These were sung in relation to the festivals going up to Yerushalayim for Pesach and for Sukkot at the end, and in the middle, of course, Shavuot. So it's Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. These were particularly utilized, and there were 15 steps by the Hulda. People went up each step, they would sing one of these particular songs, or psalms, as it were. So I have to mention that we've had so many technical difficulties related to this particular edition of the program. I think William and I have tried recording it twice. I've tried recording it twice. Last night when I produced it, I forgot to hit the share button so that you could see the slides. So I went through the whole explanation, and you would have seen nothing but this little talking red face here. I've been out in the sun in Yerushalayim, and I go from white to red. I don't brown, and nothing like that. And then trying to do this again this morning, I forgot to turn on the microphone, so you would have seen. And I'm sure you would not have stayed very long for that. So hopefully we have everything engaged and ready. So let's actually hit the share screen button here. I'm going to come over here to this particular one. We'll start with, and you'll see Hebrew verb tables, but that's not where we're starting today. We're going to start right here on, let's get the slide up here. Let's talk about the order of approach. Here we go. So our order of approach today is first to review the text itself. Up to now in the past, I've actually had recording that we've done with that to hearing the Sephardic pronunciation, but we're going to, in the interest of time, spare that. We'll review it together though. We'll do a bit of analysis of the Psalm. I've actually included some slides in here that I'm not going to comment on, but if you request the PDF, you can go over that yourself, again, in the interest of time. And then we're going to talk about two important grammatical features of biblical Hebrew, as true in Hebrew in general, but particularly biblical Hebrew, the concept of nouns, person, place, thing, or quality, with pronominal suffixes. We'll see what those are. And also prepositions, which also utilize in Hebrew the idea of the feature, the grammatical feature of pronominal suffixes. So I know it sounds a little, techie talk as far as grammar is concerned. Believe me, we'll make it nice and simple. So don't worry too much about the language, just work on getting the concept. I'm sure you will. So let's actually go to the text itself, shall we? And by the way, periodically I'll be looking over to whichever way this works out on your screen. For me, it's looking over to my left because I have another screen here, and that's where all the content is coming up in larger font here. And also, I think I can slide this down here. So there we go. All right, good. Okay, so we are focusing on Kuf Lamed Aleph. Kuf Lamed Aleph, as you see, the letter Kuf stands for 100, Lamed stands for 30, and Aleph in Hebrew as a number stands for 1, so 131. Part of Shir HaMa'alot LeDavid. So this one begins, Hashem lo gava libi velo rabu einai. And we'll get to the meaning of all this as we go through the next list with a couple slides from now. Lo hilachti bigdolot uvniflaot mimeni. Next verse. Im lo shiviti v'domamti nafshi kegamul ale imo kagamul alai nafshi. Yachel Yisrael el Hashem me'ata ve'ad olam. So that's the pronunciation. You can go back to it if you want to. And the actual meaning of the words, let's take it just kind of phrase by phrase here. The psalmist, first of all, opens with addressing Hashem. So it's really kind of a prayer, a confession, we call it a vidui in Hebrew. Lo gava. So the word lo, of course, is a negative. It means not or no. Gava has to do with, it's related to the word for pride. So, but not exalted. What was not exalted? Libi, my heart. Now, notice, and this is one of the things we're going to come back to. If you know basic Hebrew, you probably know the word lev. We have different groups here in Israel, Lev La'achim, Lev Haaretz, we talk about the heart of the country. So Libi is my heart. So the bait takes a dagesh in the middle of it, and it goes from Lev to Leb, Levi, Libi. And the yud on the end here, the little herik in the yud here, indicates the personal ending of my. And we'll see some other examples of that coming up. That's why I said that Hebrew employs these things called pronominal suffixes. And that's what this is. We'll see some more. Velo ramu, and not lifted up, einai, my eyes. So my heart has not exalted itself, and my eyes have not been lifted up. By the way, this again is a case of, right here, I'll put it over in the screen, another case of the pronominal suffix. Here it was the yud with the chirik underneath it, libi, and here it's with a patach here, and the yud. So this is personalizing it to indicate my eyes. There's different ways that we say my eyes, your eyes, his eyes, her eyes, our eyes, their eyes. All of them have different endings that come after this part right here. Or if we're dealing with lev, the same thing here. Okay. Velo hilachti, nor did I walk. Now, if you know a little basic Hebrew, you might say, well, shouldn't it be lo halachti, which would be a number 1 verb? Yes, normally it would be. This is a number 5 verb, known as hifil. I use numbers for them. I haven't heard anybody else call them that, but it's much easier than saying, pa'al, nifal, piel, pual, hifil, hofal, and hitpael. It's like just mumbo jumbo. And so I use a number system. So this is number 5 as far as the musical pattern of the verb. Lo hilachti has to do with I didn't walk about, stroll in what? Bigdolot. Now, if you might, again, know some basic Hebrew, you recognize the root in here, gimel dalet lamed, from the word gadol or gadal. So this is translated bigdolot, o v'niflaot, and things too wonderful, mimeni, for me. Literally, it's from me, but sometimes it's translated for me. So bigdolot uveniflaot mimeni. So I didn't walk about, in the pursuit of things that were outside, let's call it above my pay grade, or outside the realm of what my focus in life should be. So these 2 verses that we've been looking at are really declarations of humility. David HaMelech, King David, is saying, I really know my place in the world, and I'm declaring that to Hashem. We go on, and he says, Imlo, shiviti, if I had not, or if not, shiviti, interesting word here. It can often mean placed. It comes from a root that has to do with equal or balanced or equalized. The word shaveh, zelo shaveh, I hear in modern Hebrew. It doesn't really match up with me. It's not really equalized to me. It doesn't fit me. Loose translations. But in the case of shiviti, we run into this word, I think for the first time in the book of Psalms, in Psalm 16, that says, and you see this over the Aron Kodesh, where the Sifrei Torah, this Torah scrolls are kept in a congregation. You might see the phrase shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I have placed Hashem lenegdi, opposite me, tamid, always. So the psalmist is saying there, David HaMelech is saying there, that he's consciously conscious of Hashem's presence everywhere he goes. And in this case, he's saying about his soul state, shiviti vidomamti nafshi. I have balanced, as it were, I've placed and balanced and quieted my soul. Now, can you imagine? Remember what David HaMelech was before he was David HaMelech. He was David HaRo'eh with an ayin. He was a shepherd, right? He spent a lot of time out in the countryside, and of course here in the Judean hills, where I'm situated at the moment, it's very beautiful. And there was no big city like I'm in now with Yerushalayim, but it was like just rolling hills and pastures and greenery and springs in various places where you could water the sheep. And he was very accustomed to spending time in nature and experiencing the calm that comes from being centered, grounded, let's say, in that environment. So he was accustomed to how to calm down his soul in his connections with Hashem. And he gives now an analogy about this, kind of a metaphor. He says he's placed and quieted his soul, kegamul, as a weaned child. I looked at a number of English translations on this, by the way, just out of curiosity. I was surprised how a number of them actually use the term like a nursing child, because a gamul is really a weaned child. It's ceased, it doesn't need the bottle anymore. So, and then he uses a poetic phrase, ale, and then imo. So he's saying that he's quieted his soul in a way that's similar to what you would see if you're looking at a weaned child that's just sort of laying upon its mother, and it's very serene. And he uses the word al means on or about. Sometimes it's written ale, which is more poetic, and then Allah. We'll see another one in a moment, alai. And he says, he goes on to say, kagamul, now being very specific, alai nafshi. Again, I'm sorry to keep looking away, but I'm looking at the screen over here because I'm not wearing my glasses because of the glare that would create. Anyway, more technical issues and more than you need to know, right? By the way, how do you know that somebody's a teacher? Do you ever ask that question? Real simple. You ask them a question and they tell you more than you want to know. I confess, sometimes I'm a teacher. And rather than just focus on the simple answer the person's looking for, I want to give a whole background to it. So forgiveness, please. Thank you very much. So once again, imlo shiviti v'domamti nafshi kegamul ale imo kagamul alai nafshi. By the way, let's just focus a little technical difficulty here. This letter k, kaf here, looks sort of like this, I guess, if you look at your hand like this. And kaf has to, by the way, means like kafayad means palm. Okay, so you can see the letter there. Most of the Hebrew letters are derived from something pictorial or ideographic, I think is what they say. And ka is one of 7 letters that can fit on the front of a word to influence what comes after. So sometimes they're locative prepositions. They mean something in terms of location, like b means in. Now, I came up with a simple acronym of a way to remember it. Moshe, Moses, and Kalev, Caleb, okay? Moshe v'Kalev, those are the 7 letters. Mem, Shin, He, Vav, Kaf, Lamed, Beit, or sometimes Veit, because some take a dot and some don't take a dot. So the letter Kaf, as we'll see when we look a little later on, when we talk about these prepositions with pronominal suffixes, we'll see that kaf can mean as or like or in comparison to. So here it means like, the word like. And notice the 2 dots under here. This is called a shva. There are 2 types of shva. One is mobile, one is quiet. This is like a little speed bump in the word delay. The English word delay, we don't say delay. I had a delay at the airport. We say I had a delay. So it's like a little half vowel. And this is pronounced basically the same way, kegamul. And here it means like a weaned child. So what's the difference between this and down here, where we have patach, okay, where it's open? This means the. So in other words, sometimes when we say like in the book, I'm going to say ba sefer. If I want to say in a book, I'll say ba sefer. B, similar to this, okay, like a little speed bump. Ba sefer. If I'm saying in the book, ba sefer, so there's b and there's b, ba. And it goes by pretty quickly. So if you're speaking Hebrew, it can be a little mystifying. Like, is this like what we call a definite article, the thing? So I'm just pointing out to you, just let you know that this phenomenon does exist. Don't try to remember all this stuff. I don't want you to do that. Just things like this will come up over and over and over again as we go through our journey of looking at various pieces of the book of Psalms. We can't cover the whole thing, but we are planning to do some pretty exciting study, especially when we finish this segment on the smaller Psalms of Ascent. We're going to tackle the granddaddy of all the prakim. I keep translating in my head, so forgive me if I keep halting. I have to keep shifting terminology on the fly, which is interesting to do. So the largest chapter in the book of Psalms, many of you know this from your previous study, is 119, what we call Kuf Yud Tet. Kuf 100, Yud 10, Tet 9. So 119. And it has 22 stanzas of 8 verses each. And many of them talk in very synonymous ways about Hashem's word, about his commandments, about his precepts, about his decrees. And so we'll learn a lot of that high frequency vocabulary as you go through it. And I think gain some very interesting insights, particularly in the second to the last one, when we come to the letter Shin. Also, another characteristic of that particular psalm, and we'll talk about it when we get there, was that each of the 8 verses start with the letter of the alphabet in the order that we go. So the first 8 verses all start with Aleph. Next set of 8 verses all begin with Bet. That's a very common feature that shows up in Hebrew poetry. We'll see it in other places in the book of Psalms, and it's definitely a part of Hebrew liturgy through the years. Okay, back to our subject at hand. Who asked me that question that got me off track like that? All right, so once again, let's go through this. Im lo shiviti v'domamti nafshi kegamul alei imo kagamul alai nafshi. So David HaMelech, King David, is saying that in the same way that this child over here resting upon its mother is in a state of serenity, tranquility, repose, ease, so my soul is like that with me. William, cut this section out. I'm coughing. Okay. Now we come to the last verse. Yachel Yisrael El Hashem Me'ata Ve'ad Olam. So in the previous Psalm 130, which we haven't looked at, Kuf Lamed, this is this very similar wording is involved in the second to the last verse. And so this theme is being woven into the next verse, next Psalm as well, that David HaMelech wants all of the people of Israel, the congregation of Israel, to have a sense of hope in God as he has, and how he's achieved that when he talks about positioning and quieting himself before Hashem to gain a state of confidence and trust. Now, let me stick on my glasses for a minute, and I'll slide back up here for a moment as well to where we were. Okay. William, please be sure to cut that piece out also. So I was very excited recently to find a series of books by Rav Kook. Rav Kook was one of, I think, the first chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel about 100 years ago. And so as this place was coming together, he was a very manifest, very dominant figure. And he wrote many, many, many books. When you think about today and the technology, and back then the lack of it, you wonder, how do they do it? So if you can see this is says Sefer Tehillim, and you see the 2 asterisks there. That has to do with that this is the second volume. He has 2 volumes on the book of Psalms, but he has a complete set on all of the various books of TaNaCh. And of course, sorry to disappoint you, they're all in Hebrew. So, but I wanted to read you just from the summary on this short psalm. I mean, he's got a lot of information. He's very packed. I just wanted to give you a little quick from the first paragraph that summarizes it from what he says. So Rav Kook says, "Shir zeh hu mehaktanim shebeshirei hamalot." This song, or this psalm, is from among the smallest of the songs of degrees, uvemizmarei Tehillim, and from the collection of the book of Psalms. Vehu ben shlosha psukim, it has 3 verses. Ve'eser tzlaot. Okay, so tzlaot are what we see when we have the literal translation of tzlaot is ribs. So we have a rib here, and we have a rib here, and a rib here, and here, here, and here, here, and here, and then here, and here. So he says that b'shnei psukim harishonim, in the first 2 verses, we have 4 ribs, and in the last one, shnei tzlaot. B'shnei psukim harishonim, in the first 2 verses, HaMeshorer medaber al atzmo, the author, the composer, is writing about himself. Belashon medaber ba'ado, in language that speaks about himself. V'hu masaper al midot an v'tanuto, about his humility, uvitchono, and his trust b'Hashem in Hashem, v'hitmasruto hagmura alav, and his complete and total dedication, giving himself over. Lehitmaser is to be dedicated to dependence on him. Dvarim eli, these things, Amar HaMeshorer la'achar shepatach et hashir b'kriya b'shem Hashem. So he's saying that all these things he stated after opening the psalm with a connection to Hashem, addressing Hashem directly. Hashem lo gava libi. So he didn't begin just talking about himself. He's really making this into a kind of a prayer, really. Okay. Nimtza, so we find Shehadvarim hem ke'ein divrei vidui. I used that phrase earlier. I said, so Rav Kook is bringing down to us that these words are a kind of confession, if you will. Omed b'tfilah lifnei Hashem. So the author, the composer, is standing before Hashem in a state of prayer. Umesaper lefanav et drachav v'han hagotav. He's declaring before Hashem his ways and his behaviors. Uvasuka ashlishi, and in the third verse, Hamesayem et Hashir, which summarizes or concludes the psalm, Hameshorer ponei el kahal Yisrael umeorer otam leyachel el Hashem. So in the last verse, he then turns to all of Israel and says that they should put their trust in Hashem. Rav Kook has a lot more to say on all of this, but I just want to give you a quick little summary from that. If your objective is to read Hebrew, then I hope I give you a bracha, a blessing, that you should be able to eventually tap the wisdom, the insights of what Rav Kook has here. Okay, so let's go to another technical feature, what we're talking about here. And here are the slides that have to do with some commentary I put in there. You're welcome to request the PDF. So now let's talk about this phenomenon known as pronominal suffixes. You already know from what we said in the beginning that Hebrew gives you a word, a noun in this case, a person, place, thing, or quality, and then puts the personal ending, who we're talking about, on the end of the word. Now, if you've studied some basic Hebrew, then you already know that if you want to indicate belongingness, okay, or what we call shayachut in Hebrew, if you want to indicate possession, there's a word shel, means of or belonging to, and that takes an ending to it. You see this, notice this little dot and the yud? There's a little dot in the yud, it's called a chirik yud. This indicates possession, first person singular, okay? My. It's masculine, feminine, the same one in this case. So we can take the two words, halev sheli, the heart of me, and reduce it down. Whoops, where'd it go? Okay. And reduce it down to one word, libi, my heart. And Hebrew does this a lot. You say, why does it do it so much? Well, a part of it could be economics, because it wasn't cheap to, you didn't just go to Amazon.com and get a ream of paper delivered to your door tomorrow with Prime. It was expensive to make papyrus or to inscribe on some piece of wood or a stone or whatever. Not so simple. So economically, it made sense to have a way of making the language that one word really could do the work of two or three. Same thing is true with this word einai, but you notice the difference here. Here we have a yud, there's yud and a yud, but notice this is the chirik and this is the patach, and this is a plural form of my. So we can say ha'inayim sheli, my eyes. And by the way, let's take a little focus here, because if you look at this, if you took away the vowel points, you might be tempted to say ha'inim sheli. So you have to really know what the word is without the vowel points, but it's ha'inayim. And this phrase ayim, like the number shtaim or shnaim, they're masculine and feminine Hebrew numbers, that sound ayim on the end of a word usually indicates that there's two of something. So yad, yadayim, ayin, aynayim, ozen, oznayim, safa, sfatayim, okay? My legs, raglayim. So there are things there's a category known as dual, two, in Hebrew, and you find that a lot. The word for bicycle, for example, is one of those. Ofnaim, which basically means two ways, indicating the wheels. And ofen is, you find in the book of Ezekiel, talks about a wheel in the middle of a wheel. So that's what this is here. So that I'm getting a little bit down more technical than I wanted to, so let's move on. So we find then that there is this phenomenon where personal endings give us a sense of who is being talked about in relation to the noun that's in front of it. Okay, so we have here libi, my heart, einai, my eyes. Okay, we have here, it says his mother, imo, ha'ima shelo. So this is the inflated version. This is the collapsed or condensed version, imo. This O here with the vav is an indicator of he or his. And we'll see that in something I'm going to show you later. Now, nafshi chemda, my soul longs. So the inflated version is hanefesh sheli, which condenses down to nafshi, not nefshi, nafshi. Oftentimes, and this we talked a couple, I think 1 or 2 programs ago, we talked about nouns that have this segol or tsere, the 2 dots, either 2 dots or 3 dots in the 2 syllables here. It's known as a segolet noun. Nefesh, sefer, yelid. There's a bunch of those. So they change, the vowel underneath the first syllable changes when we start working with these pronominal suffixes here. Okay, so let's see if we can use a resource so you can benefit yourself with your own study when you run into some of these and you want to know, like, oh, here's a word that I see that this has a personal ending to it. I either need to find out what does this personal ending mean, or I want to see all the personal endings that are related to this particular word. So let's drop down for a second and go to here. I'm at pe'alim.com, as you can see. Okay, so I want to deal with, if we go up here, we see that there's a list of prepositions here in the site. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Right now, I'm just going to go to the keyboard and I'm going to put in one of the words that we were looking at today, lev, lamed, beit, or veit in this case. I'm going to go and it'll give me results. Lev. It'll give you some technical things here. Don't worry about that at the moment. Also, it talks about the absolute form and the construct state. Don't worry about that. We just want to look at all forms. Click there. Skip through this part right here. We're going to come back to this at some point in the future and talk about the difference between this state and that state. And it's not Mississippi and Alabama. Okay. I want to look at all the different forms. So I want to show that. And here is the grid that we're looking for. So the way it's structured along the top and the bottom, we have the singular and the plural. We have singular and plural up here. And so this whole section here is singular with lev. And this is plural with lev. What do we mean by that? All of this means heart. Down here means hearts. So here's the difference between my heart and the difference with my hearts. Not that you have more than one heart, right? But just technically speaking, you could create such a phrase. So here we have libi that we looked at. Now it's going to give you how it appears both with the vowel points and how it might be rendered without the vowel points. So sometimes in order to make sure that you pronounce it libi and not lebi or labi, it's going to give you this little yud right here. So libi, libenu, libcha, libech, libchem, libchen. And by the way, we have to mention this, and I'll mention this more than once, time and time again. When it comes to talking about you, Hebrew is incredibly detailed. In other words, it's always talking to you, masculine, singular, you, feminine, singular, you, masculine, plural, which includes all gender, or you, feminine, plural, which is just talking to a group of ladies. I taught for 6.5 years in a girls' high school on Long Island up until about a little over a year ago. And I remember that especially the first month, I had to adjust my thinking to constantly speak in the feminine plural, which I wasn't used to. I mean, my Hebrew's pretty good, they say, but it just, that modality, that venue was not really ready on my lips. Now it's okay. So here you can see the various forms of you. Down here, we switch to third person, talking about he, she, and they, or theirs in this case, possessive. So libo, liba, libam, liban. Now you say, that's a lot of information, Sanders. Yeah, but the good news about Hebrew is that if you learn one of these, then much of it, in many cases, all of it, will pertain or relate or connect to something else. And you'll see that. So down here's the plural version of that, which you can look at on your own time if you want. So let's take something else. Let's take, I think I mentioned the word Sefer, the book. So let's take a look at that. Let's go Samech, Fe, Resh. Go to here. Okay, good. Results for Sefer. All right. So this root, Samech, Pe, Resh, can be part of a verb system or a noun system. So here we want to find the word where it's a noun. So I'm going to look at all forms. So Sefer and Sfarim. We'll just ignore the constructs to state right now. And we want to go to looking at all with pronominal suffixes. And so we have, my book is Sifri, our book, Sifreinu. We're talking about your book, Sifrecha. Now, many people just say, HaSefer Shelcha, the book belonging to you. Okay, but if you, again, Hebrew is economical, and in newspapers and on the news and the radio, and in literature for sure, you're going to run into these forms of expression where you have a noun, a thing, a person with a pronominal suffix like you have here. So Sifrecha, Sifreich, Sifrechem, Sifrechen, Sifro, his book, Sifra, not Shifra, that's a girl's name, but Sifra, her book, Sifram, Sifran. And then you can see the plural form down here. So that's a little bit about how pronominal suffixes work in the context of a noun. So we have also, let's go back to here. Okay, good. I want to look at this with respect to prepositions. Now, within our psalm today, we saw the preposition from me, mimeni, and we saw alai. We also saw ale and alai. Those are basically the same thing, upon me or about me. So the same thing we saw, the same phenomenon that we saw with the nouns is true with the prepositions. So if we drop back out of this and we go back to here, and I put in here, actually, let's do this. Let's go to the list of prepositions because it's pretty lengthy. And if you look here, let me make sure that you're seeing this, right? You should be able to. Okay. There's probably 40, I think I counted them once, 45 or so, but at least 40 different prepositions here. We've noticed there's two columns. Yeah, so it might be close to 50. And I'm going to take a simple one that you might know, shel, which means of or belonging to. We talked about that. Like, ze hasefer shel Moshe. Ze, this, hasefer, the book, shel, of Moshe. In other words, this is Moshe's book. And if we look at it with the pronominal suffixes, the personalized endings that tell us who it is that we're talking about, we say here, sheli. And I have an easy way to remember this because there's this like person named Shelley that's always talking about mine, it's mine. So we see the narcissistic Shelley, Shelanu. There was a newspaper called Yisrael Shelanu. And again, we see four forms that relate to you. Shelcha, Shelach, feminine, Shelachem, masculine plural, Shelachen, feminine plural. And then we have the third person, Shelo, Shelah, Shelahem, Shelahen. All right, so this is a really critical one to get down quickly because it's, it's very simple. If we go back here and look at one more, again, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at the list over here on my screen. This is one of the first that I would suggest that you tackle because it's just, it's the letter Lamed, which, remember we said Moshe v'Kalev, those are the 7 letters that fit on the front of a word that can influence what comes next. And Lamed is one of those from our name Kalev, Caleb. Le, it means to, for, or indicating possession. So we have to me, to us, to you in those 4 different forms, to him, to her, to them, masculine, feminine. Okay, but notice these endings are very high frequency. So if you go back through this list here, you're going to find essentially two major categories of how the endings work out. One of those major categories is what you just saw with Shali and with Lee. That's how they develop. So you can take the phrases that we see in today's psalm, Mimeni. You can take the forms that we see in today's psalm, Mimeni and Alai, and see how those develop out as well. Okay, so it's been a little shorter lesson, and I like the way we're doing it this way. If you'd like a PDF copy of the notes for today's shiur, then you can email me at gshebrew@gmail.com. And if you're interested in just put notes in the subject line, and if you like information on a conversational Hebrew class or one-on-one learning, then just put Learn Hebrew in the subject line, and we'll go from there. All right. Thank you very much. And as always, I'd like to remind you, especially at the head of a month like we're closely with now, it's July the 5th when I'm making this, and I hope you had a good 4th. Please be sure at least once a month to buy William the equivalent of a cup of coffee. Send $5 or something through the Patreon system. All of us are doing our part to keep this interesting channel, this platform of information, which has changed many people's lives, by the way, on the digital stream. I was going to say on the air, but that's not what we are. So send off something. Each one of us contributes our time, our talent, and you can contribute from your treasure, as it were. William has the technology side of it, the heavy lifting there with all the streaming and the equipment and upkeep and all that. So just keeping it simple, let's all do our part to keep TaNaCh Talk a living reality, affecting thousands, tens of thousands, really, of people around the world. So on that note, shalom from Yerushalayim, and I'll see you next time with more Sanders on Psalms. Bye for now.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNachTalk.com, TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה